I need to show you something that happened just a few days ago, and almost nobody is talking about it. Because if you blinked, you missed the moment when the global order quietly cracked. Australia just publicly aligned with Canada against the United States. Not in private, not in some leaked memo, but live on national television in front of the world. And what you're about to hear explains how the next decade of global politics is actually going to unfold. On Sunday, January 25th, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese went on national broadcast and said 5 words that sent shockwaves through Washington. I agree with him. He was talking about Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney. 6 days earlier in Davos, Carney had said something no Western leader has dared to say out loud in decades. Something so direct, so dangerous, that it instantly made him a target. Standing in front of the world's most powerful people at the World Economic Forum, Carney declared this: "The rules-based international order is dead. The assumption that America protects its allies is over. And the idea that middle powers should just accept whatever terms Washington offers? Finished." Then he used a phrase that has been echoing inside foreign ministries ever since. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. He wasn't talking about superpowers. He was talking about middle powers, countries like Canada, Australia, South Korea, Indonesia. Not weak, not dominant, but resource-rich, technologically capable, and increasingly unwilling to ask permission. And that's when things escalated. Trump watched that Davos speech, and he did not like it. The very next day, Trump went to Davos and said, and I'm quoting directly, "Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. Not subtle, not diplomatic. A warning." He accused Canada of freeloading, said Carney wasn't grateful enough. But here's the part nobody expected. Carney didn't back down. 4 days later, standing in Ottawa, Carney looked straight into the camera and said, "To be absolutely clear, I meant what I said in Davos." When Trump's Treasury Secretary tried to claim Carney had walked it back in a private call, Carney shut that down too. And then came the move that kept me up all night. Anthony Albanese didn't just defend Carney, he invited him to address the Australian Parliament in March. That's not symbolic, that's not casual. Parliamentary addresses are reserved for messages meant to travel, for policies serious enough to be placed before a legislature. And then Albanese said it again publicly, I agree with him. Not interesting perspective, not we'll consider it. I agree with him. That was Australia on national television declaring it's ready to move beyond the traditional American-led alliance model. And here's the thing most people missed. This wasn't spontaneous. This was coordinated. Back in October, Canada and Australia quietly signed something called the Joint Declaration of Intent on Critical Minerals Cooperation. On paper, it's about lithium, nickel, rare earths, graphite. In reality, it's the foundation of an alternative supply chain designed to reduce dependence on both China and the United States. And that's where this story stops being about speeches and starts being about power. Here's what changes everything. China controls about 70% of rare earth mining and nearly 90% of processing. The United States has spent decades dependent on China for materials needed to build weapons, semiconductors, and advanced tech. Trump knows this. That's why, when Australia signed a $13 billion supply chain deal with the US in October, Trump called it a global model. But here's the real story nobody noticed. Australia took that exact framework and immediately applied it to Canada. Same structure, same goals, except now it wasn't Washington leading. It was middle powers coordinating with each other. The Canada-Australia Minerals Agreement isn't just about trade. It creates blended financing, meaning both governments co-invest in each other's strategic projects. Translation? If a Canadian company wants to develop a lithium mine, Australia can co-fund it. If an Australian firm wants to build a rare earth processing facility, Canada's defense stockpiling system can support it. This isn't aid, this is integrated strategic planning. And the agreement goes further. It prioritizes processing, not just extraction, because whoever controls processing controls the supply chain. Right now, China controls that. But here's the part Washington really doesn't like. Canada and Australia aren't just building supply chains, they're setting standards. High environmental rules, high labor rules, high transparency rules. And if you want access to their materials, You have to meet those standards. In other words, they're creating a club. And guess who doesn't want to meet those rules? China. And guess who's been pressuring allies to lower standards for market access? Also China. This is economic containment, but it's not coming from Washington. It's coming from Ottawa and Canberra. Sources now confirm the timing was deliberate. October, minerals deal. January, Davos speech. Late January, parliamentary invitation. A three-step rollout designed to build momentum before anyone could stop it. Trump's reaction tells you how seriously he's taking this. He threatened 100% tariffs on Canadian goods, mocked Canadian sovereignty, rescinded Canada's invitation to a $1 billion international initiative, called Carney Governor Mark. That's not diplomacy, that's pressure. But every threat only proved Carney's point. His argument was that great powers now use trade as weapons, tariffs as leverage, economic integration as coercion. And Trump responded by doing exactly that. So Carney doubled down. He announced plans for 12 new trade deals across 4 continents, promised to double Canada's non-US exports, and quietly revealed something huge. Canada's dependence on the US has already dropped from 75% to around 67%. In trade terms, that's massive. And Australia is doing the same with China. Here's what kept me up last night. What happens if this actually works? What happens if Canada, Australia, South Korea, Indonesia, Mexico, Brazil, and South Africa start coordinating, not as an alliance, but as a network? You don't get a new superpower. You get something more dangerous. A third pole in global politics, not aligned with America, not aligned with China. A group with enough combined economic weight, resources, and technology to resist pressure from any single power. That's what Carney was really saying in Davos. And Australia just confirmed it's possible. Now the real test is coming, March. Carney addresses the Australian Parliament. If he shows up with rhetoric, this fades. If he shows up with signed deals, funding, and new partners, this accelerates. And that's the question that matters. Are we watching diplomatic theater or the early stages of a fundamental restructuring of global power? Let me know what you think, because the next 6 months will tell us everything.